So Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 is a 3D Castlevania game. It's set in an alternate universe. There are 3 installations in the series: Castlevania Lords of Shadow, Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate, and Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. So this start of the game is taking place in the past. It's in about the 1500s. It's still a little farther in the timeline than the other 2 games. Those were around the 10,000s, 1100s. Or sorry, the 1000s, 1100s. So this first bit here, we are inside Dracula's castle. We are playing as Dracula, of course, also known as Gabriel Belmont, the chosen of God, the former leader of the Brotherhood of Light. Or sorry, not former leader, but the former chosen warrior of the Brotherhood of Light, who has now been turned to Dracula. So right now we are being sieged by the Brotherhood of Light. We're doing a quick little tutorial here. Now the first 2 parts of the tutorial are actually a little sketchy. The first 2 parts, if you don't have exact inputs, if you add even a little bit, if you add a movement or anything like that, you'll actually fail them completely. So you have to be a little careful with those 2. The rest of them are pretty easy to deal with. It's just teaching you basic mechanics, so dodging, blocking, quick recovery, and then your 2 types of magic will be the next 2. The tutorial, there's not too much to say about the tutorial. Oh, sorry, there's one last. The finishing enemies off by pressing B when they get to a certain threshold, which is the only time we'll actually use this in a run, in the run, except for boss prompts when it prompts you to do a similar thing. So basically the story going on right now is that after 500-ish years of Gabriel tormenting the villagers and killing a bunch of people, very recently Gabriel set out on a large-scale attack, and now the Brotherhood is retaliating in full force. So just teaching you a little bit about the magic here. So this is the Void Sword. The magic components of it are that it will heal you for the some of the damage you do. As well, most of the special moves will actually freeze enemies. The other one is the Chaos Claws. These will do armor breaking damage. They also do a lot more damage than the other 2. So Void Sword is the weakest of the basic attacks. Then Shadow Whip, of course. Void Sword actually being the fastest, and then the Chaos Claws are the slowest, but deal the most damage. All of the all of the moves on the Chaos Claws will break armor. So here, it's giving us 2 shielded enemies and 2 non-shielded enemies. It is sometimes possible to get past the shield enemies here without actually breaking their shields, but depending on how they stand, it's sometimes not worth it. On the single guy, it is possible to stagger him, but the tutorial requires you to break his shield, so it's actually not worth doing. So we're out of the first part of the tutorial here. I'm going to go into some climbing stages here and see a little bit more exploration of mechanics. The next part here, we're actually going to exit outside of this castle, and we're going to be greeted by a giant monstrosity of a machine piloted by the Brotherhood of Light. We're also going to run into Ronald here, who is the current leader of the Brotherhood, in his giant flying suit of death. This first fight here is pretty easy. You only need to drop him a little bit of health, which is pretty easy to do if you get your blocks in correctly. Unfortunately here, I was moving a little bit at the time, and the block window is pretty hard to do while you're moving. Still, I get a pretty good cycle here, so it's not too bad. This next portion here is completely time-based. You start off with a few enemies here. Doesn't matter if you kill them or not, you'll always get to this point at the same time, which is that Ronald orders the giant monstrosity to start punching the castle in a hopes to knock you off. What it successfully does is it knocks any of the other survivors off. However, it will not knock you off. Even if you fail to jump, you'll only take a little bit of damage. So this is a pretty neat area of effect attack that the Chaos Claws have. It does a lot of damage in a pretty short range in a pretty short amount of time. It's also the last time we're actually going to use it. Once we get out of the tutorial, we're going to start unlocking the ability to use combo moves, which are way more effective than just direct or basic attacks. So this next point here is going to be a lot of climbing. So we're just waiting for the robot here to deal enough damage to its arms that pieces of metal start falling away, so we can continue climbing up. Then we're going to enter this section here, where we determine that the Brotherhood is extremely stupid, because we are going to trick, no less than 3 times, we are going to trick Ronald here into shooting the rivets of his own robot, and thus destroying the robot. So this first section here, once we get those 2 off, we enter into another climbing thing. The obstacles here are a little scary. They don't do a lot of damage, but they can knock you off if you run into them. Now Ronald here will continue to shoot you, but he doesn't do a lot of damage, and he doesn't knock you off. So even if you take damage from him, it doesn't matter. What does matter is not running into the gears. If you run into the gears, you lose about 30 to 40 seconds, depending on where you fall down. So again, we're into a second section here, and this, like all the other parts of this section, are time-based. So we're going to have to wait for Ronald to come around for all 3 cycles. A couple enemies will drop down. We kill them because we're not doing anything else, really, and also it does make it slightly easier to get the rivets targeted if you're not being attacked by people. It is possible, if there are enough people on the screen, for them to hit you out of place just when you're trying to stand on something. So this here is a little bit of optimization. We're going to make sure the middle one gets destroyed not last, because if we destroy one of the side ones last, we can dash off of it to the center while it's being fired at, and then as soon as we're ready to go, we can hit B, and then once the small cutscene is done, we can jump up right away instead of having to wait an extra, second. Now, once we're into this section here, there are a little bit of odd jumps we can make. It doesn't seem like they should be possible, but you can make a couple of weird jumps off of these pegs here. And once we get into the right in front of the head of the beast here, we are going to get assaulted by more knights. Nothing too bad we can't handle. So to explain a little bit of the story that's going to happen after this and going into the boss fight, basically what's going to happen is Dracula is going to confront Ronald after defeating him. Ronald's going to start chanting a spell. Gabriel, obviously knowing the spell, being part of the Brotherhood, or former part of the Brotherhood, continues the chant with him. The resulting explosion destroys most of Castlevania and the surrounding areas, killing all of the Brotherhood, and Dracula meets with Alucard after. Alucard being Trevor Belmont in this. And Alucard and Dracula exchange some words, and then you kind of time jump into the year 2057. And we'll get to that in just a second here. We're going to the boss fight here. The boss has 2 phases, or 2 jumps, which he'll always do. which are basically just trying to further teach you some of the mechanics of the game. So the best way to kill this boss is by blocking him, because once you block him, you actually stagger him and you do a little bit more damage. So this is one of the 2 jumps that are built in, just trying to teach you dodging mechanics, basically. Now, after these 2, it is possible to block him in place. Well, it requires a little bit of manipulation that isn't completely 100% for certain yet, but if you keep enough distance between him doing certain moves, it seems more likely that he won't jump away. So here we're just trying to force him to do as many direct attacks as possible. Again, if you stay very close to him while he's out of break zone, it seems like he'll attack with his base attacks a little more often than he won't. And we're just trying to get the last bit of damage done here. So this is the giant explosion. We're going to skip all the cutscenes, of course, but there's a giant explosion, and we're thrust into the future. So this goes forward about 500 years into year 2057. Dracula has been asleep for a currently unknown amount of time. We do see a couple faces here and there. And Dracula at this point is old and weak and doesn't have a lot of memories of everything that's happened. He kind of has a little clips here and there, but he's not quite sure. So he exits the castle here, or the cathedral here, into modern day, or slightly above modern day, world or time, and having been asleep is not familiar with any of the modern day things at all. Sees a bunch of cars going by, all these lights and everything, and is completely unfazed by all of it. Now he is following the image of Trevor, young Trevor. Now a little bit of important backstory. At the end of Castlevania Lord of Shadow 1, Gabriel Belmont becomes Dracula. Now, at the beginning of Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate, it is revealed that the Brotherhood of Light knew this was going to happen. For whatever reason, didn't try stopping it or killing Gabriel before it happened at all. And knew that Maria, Gabriel's wife, was pregnant with him. And instead of doing anything about it, just hid Trevor away. Now, it is important, just real quick, this fight here, I'm actually just taking as much damage as I can as quickly as possible, because I can't win this fight. So I'm just trying to position myself in such a way that the beast will kill me. Trevor, going back to this, so Trevor was hidden from Gabriel as a child, and Dracula never knew about his son Trevor until Trevor was about 40, maybe 30 or 40. When Trevor was informed that he was Dracula's son, and went on a quest to avenge his family name, ends up actually getting killed. Then on his dying breath, Dracula finds out that Trevor's his son, and infuses some of his blood into Trevor in order to save his life, and Trevor then has become his idol card. All of this to say that Dracula having any memory of young Trevor is preposterous because he never knew Trevor as a child. But anyway, he follows young Trevor. So now we have all of our powers back. We've met with Zobek, the Lord of Necromancy, who is the person in charge of, ruining our life, or responsible for ruining our life. He controlled us into, or tricked us into pretty much doing all of the bad that's happened to us. So right here I'm trying an animation cancel. The animation cancel is called somersault skipping. So if you do a somersault at the same time as interacting with something, you can actually cancel the interaction. There's not a lot of things we do it on, because a lot of the interactions are either slow, don't work, or will break the game, such as this door here. So now, at this point, we are working with Zobek in order to take down Satan, who is the other person who has wronged us in our life. And Zobek cannot take Satan down on his own, and so he has enlisted our help to help him. In exchange for that, he is going to deliver the killing blow on us with our own weapon, the Vampire Killer, which was lost at the end of Lords of Shadow 1 in an alternate dimension, or another dimension which we can no longer return to. Zobek somehow got a hold of it, and now, in exchange for delivering the final blow upon Gabriel, who has lived a life of suffering and sorrow and all of that fun stuff, we will defeat Satan and hand the world over to Zobek. So at this point, we are entering one of the nearby science labs, where one of the 3 acolytes who are trying to resurrect Satan are hiding. So this part here introduces the stealth section. There are a few things to note about it. Changing into rats is awkward. You can get stepped on, and it lets you sneak around into the portals. Those guards that we just saw, they're Golgoroth guards, they are invincible. There is no way to kill them. They are somehow the most incredible and indestructible beings in the world, even stronger than Dracula, Satan, and all the rest. There is a very, very fast movement available in stealth sections. For whatever reason, if you dash and tap your shadow daggers at the same time, you'll do this. You can do the starting half of the dash, which is the fastest part, and you can do it over and over again. So this is introducing the Bat Swarm, which allows us to distract enemies and stuff like that, and just giving us a little bit more of the stealth section. So now at this point in the game, we see young Trevor yet again, and he's kind of leading into this tunnel of light. And this is where the game gets very interesting to explain. So, going back to earlier, I've already described Castlevania, the castle, Gabriel's castle, being destroyed in an explosion. The city that we are actually in right now is built into the ruins of old Castlevania. So it's called Castlevania City, and it is built on the ruins of the destroyed castle. So now here we are in Castlevania, the city that the castle that has been destroyed. It is restored in its fullest glory, more or less, and we are exploring it. So there's the canonical explanation, and there was another explanation that I recently heard. Both of them are a little bit of a stretch, but the game explains this as, in a little bit, we're going to get what's called the White Wolf Medallion, and I'll describe it when it gets there. But basically, the explanation is that Gabriel created a pocket dimension inside this medallion that contained all of his memories of the castle, of this and that. And Alucard, in his attempt to help his father, which we'll get to much later on, injected some of his memories as well into this to create this world in a pocket dimension that Gabriel can go to safely to reclaim all of his lost abilities without Zobek or anybody else knowing. So we're getting into the first part of the first boss of the game here, outside of the tutorial. This section here, there is a little bit of a time save. You can actually, instead of the intended method, you can actually dash, and run, and if you're quick enough, you can actually run along the collapsing floor without using them as breakpoints. So this is the first boss here, and this is where we grab the Void Sword. Now, at this point, we actually have full power, unlike in the tutorial, so we can start using abilities. The one addendum to that is that there are a few abilities which are actually locked until after the fight, but in the fight you can learn a couple of them. So this boss is a little annoying. All of the powerful things in the game are ground-based moves and not aerial-based moves. So this move here that we're going to learn is called Whirlwind. It's the fastest DPS in the game if you can line it up correctly. We're going to use it here just because we can usually one-cycle this legs here if we line it up properly. You can get the tip of Whirlwind. If you get the center of Whirlwind on the enemy, you deal a massive amount of damage. So this boss is annoying because the being can only be damaged where the blood is. And after the first section, it moves the blood to the top half. So you have to do the entire fight in the air. And all of the combo moves are actually ground-based moves. There's not any combo moves in the air. There are moves you can do in the air, but they're all basically just basic attacks. Even one of the stronger basic attacks, which would be Guillotine, which we'll use a little bit later on, because it has a ground component to it as well, would hit the stones and cause it to actually be blocked. So instead, we're forced to just do basic attacks in the air, which makes the fight a little slow. We also have to do a lot of dodging, which isn't ideal. Ideally, you want to stay in the air for at least 3 attacks each time. The third attack will do twice as much damage, so doing 30. It is important to note, even if the first attack misses for whatever reason, as long as the attacks aren't broken, either by being knocked out of the air or whatever, it'll actually still do 30 damage. It's not the third consecutive hit, it's just the third hit you do. So we managed to beat the boss here. We're going to get the Primordial Gem out of it, which will allow us to use the Void Sword outside of here, and also will allow us full use of all of the spells. So there are 2 important spells we're going to learn. We've already used Whirlwind, of course, and the second one we're going to learn is Blizzard. Blizzard's a very, very important spell, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. So this is just showing us the magic fonts where we can restore magic. We are doing New Game Plus, and we are using the Transmutation Rune. So these fonts aren't as important as they are in No Transmutation Rune. Transmutation Rune is a DLC item that allows us to turn any of the sub-weapons into any other sub-weapon at a 1-for-1 exchange rate. This allows us to transform all of the useless sub-weapons in the game, which are all of them except Ensnared Demons, into Ensnared Demons. Ensnared Demons give unlimited magic for 45 seconds. Since we can carry up to 5 of all the other sub-weapons, and we actually make it to a shop about 40 minutes into the game, that lets us buy 3 of each sub-weapon for a total of 15. We have at least 15 Ensnared Demons across the run, excluding the relic we just picked up, excluding any drops we get from enemies or destructibles, which is a lot of magic we get for free. So now, Fake Trevor is being attacked by vampires, and you actually do see an Ensnared Demon I got right here, which is a pretty lucky drop. You normally don't get any drops this early on. It also allows me to safely, if needed, use an Ensnared Demon on the first or the next boss to ensure that I get the glitch I need going. So you need to kill 5 vampires and get the 6th flower here, and then the fight will be over. We're using Whirlwind here. Another important part about Whirlwind, it uses a very, very small amount of magic for the amount of damage it does. So it's actually really nice to use pretty much anywhere. So at the end of this fight here, we're going to get the White Wolf Medallion. The White Wolf Medallion allows us to go freely between Castlevania City and Castlevania This World here. The only restriction is that you have to be standing on one of these medallion icons. So the other theory about this world which still has its issues, is that every time you go back into Castlevania, it's actually Alucard using one of his a variation of one of his abilities that you can use in the DLC, which is called Timeless Visions, which is just making Dracula see things in the past. It still has its own issues, so I'm not going to touch too much on it, mostly because it's not lore, but it is also an interesting theory. It has a lot of reasoning behind it, but we won't touch on it too much. So now we are back in the real world, and we are ready to... almost ready to take on the first boss. We just need to get to her. And by first, I mean first Acolyte. So here is a pretty neat animation skip. So we're going to freeze this guy here and jump over this wall. And on this other side here, we need to turn into a rat and freeze this vent here. Now, the vent has a pretty long animation, has this turning into a rat, but if you time it just right, you can freeze the vent and dash into the shadows here and turn into a rat, and the animation for the shadows, which is slightly smaller than the animation for the vent, will play at the same time, and you can actually skip waiting for the other animation. So going into this next section here, we're going to do a small optimization. We are going to... we need to gnaw a wire as the rats, which will allow us to continue. Basically, there's a guard watching a door. We're going to short circuit the scanner for the door, so a scientist is going to come out, and then we're going to possess the scientist and then progress. After we gnaw the wire, we're going to get a checkpoint. We're actually going to return to checkpoint, which will spawn us as Dracula outside the shadow pit, which is going to save about 10 to 15 seconds. So going into this next fight here, we're going to fight Ryza here in her first form. So, a few things to note. We are going to use Whirlwind, and we're actually going to be conserving our blue magic. We're going to be going for what is called the Infinite Blizzard glitch. So the Infinite Blizzard glitch, there are two kinds of Blizzard glitches. One that drains your mana, and one that doesn't. Mana is very important, so we're going to be looking for one that doesn't drain your mana, of course. So what the Infinite Blizzard glitch is it can be done on any fight whose death ends in a cutscene. If you deal the final blow on an enemy, for whatever reason, when it transitions to the cutscene, it actually doesn't unflag the blizzard from being active. So when you come out of the cutscene, Blizzard is still active, but you have a full range of everything. You can move, do other spells, and stuff like that. The only restriction is that you can't close the game or return to a checkpoint in any way, and you can't cast Blizzard again, which is fine because you don't need to cast Blizzard when Blizzard's already going. This is extremely useful for a multitude of reasons. Blizzard is an AoE spell. It deals... doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it does freeze, and it does heal you. The most important thing is that it freezes enemies in an AoE effect, which means we can do a lot of fights very easily because the enemies can't react, but we can also skip a lot of fights by freezing the enemies and then just walking away. For whatever reason, sometimes that happens where you can actually get a whirlwind off when she goes into that. It's not specifically a whirlwind, it is any move, although you aren't supposed to be able to do anything, you actually sometimes do. So she enters a second phase. It's not based on damage, it is based on time, I believe. You can actually get her down pretty low. Now, at this point, I'm just trying to get as much magic as possible, because while Blizzard doesn't take a lot of magic per tick, it doesn't do a lot of damage either. And Ryza here has a weird health bar in the sense that it drops to yellow and flashes when it reaches the bottom, so it's really hard to tell how much health she has left. So I'm trying to get as much damage or magic as possible so I can be safe with my Blizzard. The other scary thing about Blizzard is sometimes she'll hit you out of it before being frozen, and you can accidentally hit her while trying to recast it. Now, fortunately, that doesn't happen, and we do get the glitch here. So now that we have the glitch, you'll start to notice things breaking around us. The good thing is that we did get the good Blizzard, so we do get to keep our magic. It also means we don't have to retry for the Blizzard glitch, although if we did get bad Blizzard glitch there, which isn't often, it's uncertain what causes it, but there are a few things we have figured out. The vampires, where we were rescuing Trevor, you can get it there. It always results in a bad Blizzard. Now, this doesn't actually matter, because even if we did get it, we would not be able to bring it into a stealth section, because the important thing about the Blizzard glitch is that it deals damage always, which is good in most cases, but in any part of the game where you're not supposed to be able to do damage, it's actually bad. In stealth sections, it will cause you to soft lock. You will not be able to progress because you can't get around the enemies without triggering getting detected, and you can't undetect. So the only solution would be returning to checkpoint. So you just return to checkpoint anyway. Now, if I did get bad Blizzard, this is another area, or if I missed it altogether, this fight right here is actually another place where you can get Blizzard. So there are a decent amount of places to get Blizzard, even if you miss it or get bad Blizzard. So this fight here, we kill the jailer, and the jailer drops a key, which allows us to progress here. So one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that the fastest movement in the game is actually a dash followed by a direct attack from either the Void Sword or the Chaos Claws. Now, it is only significantly faster. It is only slightly faster. Anything less than 2 or 3 dashes, it's almost irrelevant, although it doesn't take a lot to switch to the sword. Also, sorry, it is technically not the fastest movement in the game. The fastest movement in the game would be misdashing, but misdashing takes a lot of magic, and you cannot always do it. So the fastest regular movement would be dashing with a direct attack at the end. So this is one of the... this is the first area where we are able to use the Blizzard glitch to actually skip a fight. Normally we would have to kill at least 3 of these. You can try and get away with 2, but you would have to kill usually 3 and then bat form the last one. Otherwise, they'll throw poisonous mist at the climbing area, which will prevent you from falling off. So we get here and we find out that the Chupacabra here is locked up. The Chupacabra, while being a rascal, is actually very helpful in our journey, and so we set out to help him. Now, we're supposed to move these light bridges so that we can get across to the other side and lower him. However, it is possible to actually jump over here without moving them, and you can make it all the way across. Now, this is really helpful because the platforms take a very long time to actually move, so we save a good chunk of time here by just running across, because it saves actually moving the light bridge 4 times. Excuse me, 3 times. Now, it is possible to do the somersault animation counseling on this. However, they are very finicky. One problem with the interactions in this game is that all of the interactions use the same button as grabbing. Now, the problem with that is a lot of the times, even though you're standing in front of an object and it's prompting you to do something, you'll actually just grab the air in front of you up to a few times for no reason whatsoever. So this is another area that you can animation cancel. However, the rings around it don't go any slower, so it actually takes the same amount of time. So this next area here, we are going to do a skip. The skip is actually pretty interesting. It uses the damage. It's basically a damage boost. So we're going to head across here. This introduces harpies. Harpies are pretty annoying, but you don't actually fight any of them in the run. So normally what we'd have to do is we'd have to climb around these harpies and fight 2 jailers, grab 2 keys, and then open the gate, which gives us an extra key for later, but it's a lot faster this way. So this is a little harder to position, but basically you're waiting for the harpies to do their unblockable move here, and then you need to jump at just the right height, and then you can actually get just enough height to be able to dash onto the platform behind you, skipping the entire fight. Now, it is a little awkward to do because you need to position yourself just right, but fortunately there are 3 harpies there, so you have plenty of chances. If you miss all 3 of them, you can back off, wait for the blizzard to wear off, and then try again. So now we're entering into the Gorgon fight. So Medusa and her 2 sisters, her 2 sisters were very amicable towards you, but for whatever reason, Medusa was possessed, and possessed both of her sisters. So now they have transformed into this giant monstrosity. However, we do get the Chaos Claws. So this wall here is armor. Now, because we have Blizzard on, there's actually only 2 points where we can break this wall, which is on the side. Otherwise, the Blizzard glitch will actually prevent you from breaking it. Now, this fight is another one of those aerial fights. Like I said before, aerial combat is kind of garbage. But we do have the Blizzard glitch, which is doing a little bit of damage on the side. As you can see, Blizzard is ticking up as every time we're close there. Now, Blizzard is actually doing damage when it's not supposed to be able to, which is very important in the next part of this fight. So while we're doing damage here, as soon as we get to the next phase, one of the arms is going to lower to the ground. We're going to freeze it in place and then scale up the arm towards the Gorgon head. Now, this is a part of the game where we're not supposed to be able to do damage. We are doing damage to it, however, with the Blizzard glitch, which the game doesn't like. So the arm starts to kind of freak out a bit. Now, this part of the game is this part of the run is a little scary. You have to take it very slow. Because if you... so there's a few different mechanics for climbing. One of them is just holding a direction and you'll go up very slowly. You can also jump, which will allow you to take an extra peg at a time. If you jump on the arm, you'll almost certainly be thrown into the abyss. Which you're not supposed to be able to do. You aren't supposed to be able to fall off the stage, but you can do it if you're glitching. And that will cause you to start at the beginning of the fight, which isn't too big a deal, but the important thing is it costs you the Blizzard glitch. However, if you take it slow, you can usually get out of this fight with Blizzard glitch. It's pretty likely that you keep it after this. So fortunately, this boss actually does have a quick kill for the third cycle. After the second cycle here, again, we're going to take down the other face. There's two possible things it can do. One of them, it will always do the thing we want, but sometimes it can cast down fire, rain down fire from above, before it does the move we want. The move we want it to do is that it's going to take in a deep breath of oxygen, and when it does that, it actually opens itself up to be frozen, which is an insta-kill on the rest of the fight. Now, if we miss it, sometimes it can do it again, or we can continue to just punch it in the face. At the end of this fight, however, which is very near, we're gonna get the ability to use two very powerful fire moves. So one of them is Fire Cover, which is an AoE move, and we did get the quick kill right away here. Now we were out of magic here, so I do have to switch to an Ensnared Demon to drop it, and we actually missed the cycle here. However, it's going to do it again in a second here, so it's not the end of the world. We're just waiting for it to rain fire down. So we actually got a little unlucky here, because for whatever reason, it just didn't take. So we are just going to punch it a little bit until it gets to this cycle here. And there we go, we got the quick kill. So we do unlock two very powerful fire moves. One of them is Fire Cover. Fire Cover is an AoE effect, which will deal fire damage and bring enemies closer to the center. This pairs really well with Blizzard, because they all get frozen while they're taking damage. And it's actually, the damage from Blizzard is usually enough to cause enemies that would normally not die to one fire cover to die from one fire cover because of the extra damage. The other move we're going to learn is Explosive Earthquake. Now, Explosive Earthquake deals damage to enemies at random based on how many enemies are there. The damage isn't random, the hits are. But it deals a lot of damage very quickly. And if there's only one enemy, well, then it's only going to do damage to that enemy. The upgraded Shadow Daggers, which are our projectile attack here, the Chaos version of it actually does a significant amount of damage, so it's not something to be frowned upon in certain areas as well. That jump we did there saves about 8 seconds. It's a pretty neat little banister trick. So we're going into this section here. Now, the other... when we did the Harpy Skip, instead we could have taken an alternate route towards the jailers and killed both jailers, grabbing both keys. Now, if we did that here, there is a slightly alternate fight here, because we have an additional key, and we don't actually need this one. We could instead go to the door handle, use Fire Cover to pull two enemies close, and then off of that we would just use our extra key and open it, having the Blizzard freeze the enemies and act as a shield to prevent other enemies from hitting us. That does still waste a little bit of time. Getting the Harpy Skip is still faster. But if you don't feel comfortable, or if you want to play it a little safe, you can actually take the alternate route. It still saves a little bit of time. Over, obviously, not having the Blizzard glitch and having to do the fight entirely. But it isn't as fast as the Harpy Skip. So at this point here, we're actually going to find that the Chupacabra has opened up a shop specifically for us, because there's nobody else to buy things from him, where he'll sell us various sub-weapons and keys and stuff like that, artwork as well. Now, this is important for two reasons, because we're about to get 15, effectively 15 Ensnared Demons, which is huge. The other nice thing is that he's going to give us what's called a Talisman of a Demon. So the Talisman of the Demon calls very, very powerful magic, which will kill all the enemies in a certain area, or if it's on a boss, deal a significant amount of damage. Now, there are two uses for this that you can choose from. One of them is just using it on the final boss. However, there is a part of the game that is a very long fight that has a strat where you freeze as many as possible and then do a very long climbing section. The other option is to use the talisman there to make that climb a lot safer by having no enemies that can shoot you off. It is possible to do that section without killing the enemies at all, but they can shoot you down, and it can make the area very, very tedious. So now that we're out of Castlevania again and back into the real world, we're going to head into a pretty long spree without any bosses. There's a couple fights with a sub-boss, but nothing too spectacular for now. So first we're actually going to go back to Zobek and check in with him. So after we defeated Ryza, the first acolyte, we took her back to Zobek's for questioning, and Zobek asked some questions, did some things, and I guess one other really important story thing that I forgot to mention is Ryza actually released a lot of chemical gas into the city and either killed pretty much everybody or turned them into biochemical mutants. Which is the creatures we fought right before Ryza. Now that we're actually back in the real world, we see that a lot of people are turned into them. So we are now looking for an antidote, because, well, Zobek doesn't want to rule a world with nobody in it. So we're going to do a quick little optimization here. If you're standing in the right area, you can hit both of those at the same time. The second one while the first one is starting to freeze, which saves one animation of staring at the pipe. So during Zobek's questioning, he determined that the location of the antidote was in Victory Plaza, so we're going to head over there. Now, the city's infrastructure is pretty confusing, so we're going to have to take a lot of sewers and stuff like that, and then hitch a ride on a train. So in order to do that, we're going to have to do a lot of stealth sections and a lot of confusing routes. So we turn into a rat here to get into a different section of the district we're currently in. And from there, we're going to infiltrate a medical ward. So here is a nice little optimization that was found by Turbo here. There are a lot of enemies here that will knock you down when you try to get up. I do actually try for it first without dealing with all of them, but then I decide to go grab all of them and freeze them. I actually don't implement the optimization here, which is that if you don't want to go for a first try, you can use a fire cover to bring everybody together, which will freeze all of them in place. So this section here, we're just waiting for the room to decontaminate, and then we're going to go in. So we're breaking all of the things here, looking for a drop. We do have a lot of ensnared demons at our disposal, but any more is not a bad thing. So there is a small optimization. Instead of breaking that door, you can just jump up to it. It is a little harder to do. And that second one, I go for kind of the same thing, but before I can land on the table, Blizzard breaks it. So I just jump over it instead with the grapple point. So this area there's not too much to talk about. We're just opening some doors basically so that we can move on. There's nothing too much going on. This entire area is kind of a dull point in the run. It's mostly just getting from point A to point B. So at this point in the story, we currently know the location of one acolyte. She's in custody, more or less, with Zobek. We don't know where Alucard is at all. We don't know where the other two acolytes are. And Zobek is still a maniacal, selfish person. At this point in the run, so this is a rather unfortunate series of events here. They can actually hit you from pretty far away, even though you can't see them in the doorway. I threw an ice block there, or blast there, just to freeze them so they don't do it again. So at this part of the run, we're actually pretty good on sub-weapons here. We have all of the abilities we need, which isn't a problem in New Game Plus because you have so much experience already. This here, we're going to introduce a new enemy here. It's the Riot Police, so there are still some human members left. This is also another place you could pick up Blizzard Glitch. This Blizzard Glitch isn't as useful as some of the other ones, but it's still pretty alright to have. This is a nice area for fire cover. This is actually a pretty new inclusion to the run. Fire cover, like I was saying before, with the Blizzard, brings them all together and then freezes them, so they can't really do anything. Makes short work of this fight. So this loading zone here is an interesting loading zone because it's one of the few places that has confirmed kind of a weird bug. It's kind of hard to do, and I'm actually foolishly doing the thing that I know could ruin the run, because I know it's pretty unlikely. But you can, at some doors, by air dashing into them while it's loading, actually go through them. There is a door a little earlier on in the run, you can actually do it, which, instead of falling you out of the world, actually puts you in an area you want to be in. It actually skips about 2 minutes of the run, but it's incredibly hard to actually do. There's not really a consistent way to go through it. It's just something you don't want to happen usually, so there's not really any way of doing it consistently. So this is a little unfortunate here. He was basically a tick off of being frozen, so I tried to go, and then I got shot down. So this is one of the few magic fonts we actually use in the run, because it's right there. We don't have to go out of our way. We don't need a lot of magic in the next section, so it's not super important. We usually save Ensnared Demons for boss fights, or when we absolutely need magic for something. So there's not too much going on right now. We're just, this is a pretty long section of the game where you're just trying to get from point A to point B. Fortunately, after this, we have all of the areas unlocked on the map, and we can actually use a map room to go to places we need. Unfortunately, there's not actually many times where we need to do it. Everything else after this section here is pretty straightforward. It's either in the same area you start in as, or after a cutscene you're put into the same area, or something like that. But nonetheless, so this here is the electrical tower. It has a lot of obstacles which will knock you off. Fortunately, most of them respawn you pretty close. The only important thing here is that you don't fall off across this jump here or at the top by doing a dash. There are two parts at the top there where if you fall down, you'll actually land on a ledge much farther down instead of dying, which means you'd have to reclimb the entire thing. As you can see now, what's left of Castlevania City is kind of a war zone between the riot police and the mutants. In this area here we're about to enter is a neat little area in terms of game theory. So on the console version, there's actually a lot more tricks you can utilize. There's a lot of things that just don't work on PC for whatever reason. And a lot of really cool things that we could actually probably do a lot with. But PC loads are just so much faster. So one of the things is called the infinite hover. Now we do kind of a half container skip here, which is that we climb up on top here and jump to the bottom. However, on console, it is possible to do what's called an infinite hover. So when we first jumped up on that top container, we could actually run off the back, and then in console, if you take out Shadow Dagger, and then you switch between your magic skills over and over again, just tapping them rapidly, you'll actually descend. It's not complete hovering, but it's extremely reduced a falling. You'll basically reduce your falling to a pixel or two at a time instead of significantly. So you essentially hover forever, and you wait for the next container to come underneath you, and then you just run off the back and land. And it saves actually about 20 or 30 seconds over what we do, but unfortunately it's just not possible. So we're getting into the stealth section here, and like I said before, we're going to return to checkpoint to drop the blizzard glitch, because we want to be able to progress. So this area here is a little annoying to actually get off, because the guards are standing in front of each other. So this is an interesting thing here. The stealth sections are a little awkward, like I was saying earlier. And I actually managed to throw the bat on the guard, and the other guard was distracted, but for whatever reason, I still got detected. So I had to reload the checkpoint here, which is a little unfortunate, but fortunately it doesn't cost too much time. Now, my movement was a little awkward there because I was trying really hard not to get detected a second time. Now, the unfortunate thing here, like I was saying earlier, the Golgoroth guards are invincible, more or less, except when you possess them. Your blood, because it's not human when you possess them, for whatever reason, you're also infusing your blood with theirs or something, so your blood slowly rots away at them. It's not the best explanation, but the blood does rot away at them, so... So this area here is a very, very small optimization. The guard walks very slightly faster when he is not possessed. So his full route around here would be, if we were to let him go, he would walk around the pillar by himself. However, what we're going to do is we're going to let him get to basically exactly where we want him, which is the next sensor. We're going to drop down and then we're going to possess him. We possess him a little early here, just because he will turn around at some point, so we want to get him before that point. So once the door is down, we're going to head back and turn into a rat, so that we can sneak onto the train here. And then we're going to get into a interesting kind of side-scroller. Now, interestingly enough, if you were to run on, it is possible to lose your rats there if you run at the guards, but there's no reason for you to do it. So once we board the train, Satan Spawn actually shows up and starts attacking to us. So we're gonna kill the first one here pretty easily. One whirlwind does it, but then more start showing up. As well, the Golgrith guards are alerted that we're here. And they are willing to destroy their own train rather than let us live. So we kind of have to do a lot of parkouring. And one other thing I'd like to add is that we have been asleep, and by we I mean Gabriel, has been asleep for 500-ish years, if not more. And yet here he is aboard this giant moving steel contraption of a demon that is a train, and he is completely unfazed by it and is willing to jump on top of it as if this is like a thing he saw in an action movie. But we'll allow it. So this area here has a lot of parts and a lot of cutscenes as we jump and dodge and weave between parts. And this is actually a very funny stealth section here. This is actually when I was first playing this game, however many years ago, probably 4 at this point, this is the only part of the game I ever had to look up, because I didn't know what to do, because it never occurred to me that the guard would not go past that part where he did, and I always panicked and tried something different until I finally gave up. Turns out the solution is he turns around and walks away. So after this section here, we get into literally an auto-scroller. It doesn't even... You can't kill this one, so the only thing we really look for is to get a little bit of magic off of him, because this section of the train will always end at the same point. You can see a lot of Castlevania City in the background. It's a very tall city. We are very far off of the actual ground at all points in time in this world, for whatever reason. It is nice during that cutscene. You can actually start moving forward a little bit just to cheat a little bit of time out of the game. So this area here, we have to, in quotes, start dodging the signs on top of the train. It wastes no noticeable time actually getting hit, and the amount of damage it does is actually worth it. Even if you get hit by every single one, you won't die, so it's not super relevant. So here it is possible to get a blizzard glitch off of it. There's not a lot of fights left before we have to drop it. You can try to bring it to Camilla, which is the next boss, which does help a little bit. I choose not to go for it, because I'm actually going for another damage boost skip similar to the Harpy skip. Now, this skip is actually a lot harder than the Harpy skip, but it doesn't waste too much time missing it. And I say that it wastes about 30 seconds. However, getting the blizzard skip or glitch for it only would save about 10 seconds. So it's just choosing the options of saving 10 seconds guaranteed over a potential 30 to 40 seconds. So this area here, we are being escorted by Zobek's lieutenant. The Zobek's lieutenant is an automaton in armor who follows his every command. Zobek ordered the lieutenant to come help us, so he does. This introduces a very annoying mechanic to the game, which is used very infrequently because of all the infrequent times that we're actually with Zobek. So here I actually get an ensnared demon drop after transmuting a bunch of things into ensnared demon. So I actually take a few seconds there to untransmuted demon or ensnared demon. Or sorry, to transmute an ensnared demon into something else so that I can grab the ensnared demon. So the annoying mechanic here is asking the lieutenant for help. There are a few things in the game which require the lieutenant's help to do it, and it's annoying because the lieutenant is very slow. So the attempted script I'm going to do here is off of this enemy here. You only get one chance at it normally. I get really unlucky here because he actually does the move while I'm trying to get into position. Normally he does his unblockable 4 or 5 seconds later. Now, the reason you only get one shot is because of Alucard. The lieutenant. Spoilers for later on, the lieutenant is Zobek, actually. Or is Alucard, actually. Because the lieutenant is here, he actually he fights as if he were a actual relevant character. And he actually aggroes the demon spawn, which prevents him from doing the unblockable attack again. So like I said, missing it and not having Blizzard doesn't waste too much time. But if we had been able to get it, we would have skipped this entire section, and then been able to move on. We would still get this cutscene, funnily enough, even though Zobek's lieutenant is still in the other room, fighting creatures. Now we're going to continue onward towards the cure. However, as we get close, young Trevor, who we've never met, comes into play again. So I'm actually dropping an ensnared demon here because I'm looking to try and kill these as quickly as possible. I actually tried to go for an explosive earthquake here, but I wasn't on my dagger, so I'm not able to go for it. Even if I had gotten the explosive earthquake off, I probably wouldn't be able to kill both blood pools. Now, the thing about these enemies here is if you kill them, they'll turn into blood pools. Now, there's two options, which is you can actually freeze the skeletons, and if they die frozen, they won't turn into a blood pool. But if you trap them into a corner, then you can kill them pretty easily. So this is introducing a odd little mechanic for the next chapter here. Now, in this area here, we are confronted by Camille, who is jealous of our love with Maria, who Maria, by the way, is our dead wife, and she is back. And Carmilla is also Camilla was the second Lord of Shadow, who was the Lord of Vampires, and also somebody we knew for all of the time it took us to kill her. So for some reason she's now a love interest in this alternate world, or attempting to pretend she's a love interest. So that little stealth section there We had to activate the 4 blood markers before Carmilla could deactivate all of them. Also, she's looking for you, and if she catches you, she'll lock you in the room and spawn an enemy to attack you, which significantly slows you down. Now, in this area here is called, in the speedrunning community, Awful. It is a pure 50-50 which Maria you get there. You're looking to drink the blood of the real, quote-unquote real Maria, to stop the poison in your blood from Carmilla a little longer. It is completely random which one it is, and getting the wrong one makes you restart or loses you the game. Game, quote-unquote, game's over you. It lets you restart at the last checkpoint, but it ends the game. So we got pretty lucky on it, and we're entering into the Carmilla fight here. Now, she does have a very powerful shield on her, so we throw down an Ensnared Demon and start using Earthquake to break the shield in the first 2 stages. Then we use Explosive Earthquake because it will damage her wherever she is. We're also using Explosive Earthquake here instead of Whirlwind because it's just easier to keep her keep doing damage from her without dashing around and using Whirlwind. We want to keep doing as much damage to her as possible, so that she doesn't use her giant arms to grab us. But now that we finished that, we have the Mist Form ability, so that'll let us get through bars and stuff like that. Which is convenient because bars are what we couldn't get through earlier. Now, it would have been possible to get Blizzard off of Carmilla. However, we're almost immediately going to have to drop it, so it's not really worth getting. Because while it doesn't take a lot of time to set up, it does require you to stop killing her, carefully lower her health down, and then finish her with Blizzard, which is annoying enough as it is. Now, the other option is to keep Blizzard up until the Carmilla fight from the train, but because of the risk of losing it to choosing the Marias, which is a 50-50 every single time, it's not really something you can plan on. So there are a couple ways to get over here. We used to actually just wait for the guys to shoot us over. However, you can stand on the slightly elevated rock and just area attack over. The area attack gives you a little bit of extra height. So in this next area here, we're actually doing a pretty big skip. This saves between, I believe, 3 to 4 minutes. So what we're going to do is, normally you would have to run around the building, turning on the power to various elevators, and going up slowly. However, what we're going to do here is we're going to use a couple of our movement abilities. So first we're going to jump onto the railing. Then from the railing, we're going to jump as high as we can and use Guillotine. At the top of our Guillotine, we're going to turn into Mist Form, which is going to kind of force our hitbox onto the ledge there. And once we force ourselves onto the ledge, we can actually jump from that area up into the next area. And then we can skip the entire thing. So the trick is a little hard. It is possible to do it without killing the enemies, but they started to get annoying, so I just did a quick fire cover to kill all of the enemies. Now, since this saves so much time, it is actually worth taking a little bit of time to do it. And even though it is taking me a little longer than I would like, it is actually still faster than doing it the regular way. Like I said, it saves about 3 to 4 minutes. And I do just do a little bit of an extra jump there. It's not required, but sometimes when you land on the ledge there, it likes to force you off. And so after this, we're going to head into actually a kind of annoying lead up to the boss. So we're into another stealth section, which is why we can't have Blizzard here. However, this stealth section, it is impossible to get into the next area before the scientist leaves. The reason that's annoying is because this scientist takes forever to load in. Once he gets to the scanner, which he is at about right now, you can't make it to him because there is a man inside the room who will actually catch you. And if he catches you, of course, you get caught and you have to restart the stealth section. So we have to wait for the next scientist to come in. Now, the reason this takes so long is because what's going on right now is that all of the scientists for this company are being vaccinated against the poison. So once the scientist enters the scanner, or goes to the scanner, he enters the room, and then there's a long process of the scientist in the head scientist administering the vaccination to all of the scientists, and then he stays there for a while. So we have this nice little moment of just standing here waiting for the next scientist to come out. Finally, the scientist comes out, and we throw down a bat form on the guard so that we can possess the scientist. Now, we do let him get a little closer than we would like, but still within reason for us to get to him before getting caught. And so now that we are done this, we are going to be heading into the second fight against Ryza, and the first possible place to pick up the second Blizzard glitch of the game. So this fight is extremely easy because we have so many snare demons. We're going to pop one here, of course, and we're going to start doing as much damage as possible. Now, if we weren't looking to do the Blizzard glitch, we could actually kill her before she does the cycle where she flies off. But because we want to take it slow for the Blizzard glitch, we're actually trying to take her down to just enough health to do the Blizzard, but not kill her. Since the Blizzard glitch takes so long, we actually do waste a little bit of time. And so here I'm just throwing some Chaos Bombs. Like I said, Chaos Bombs do a decent amount of damage, so I'm just picking away at her while I can so that I can lower her for the Blizzard glitch. Now, the first two times there, I was trying to just catch her in the edge of the Blizzard glitch, but she is a little wily, so I do just start throwing out... so I start throwing out some freeze bombs to freeze her, and then using Blizzard. I do hit her a couple times just because I look up and see that her health is pretty close. And we do get the Blizzard glitch off of this here. Now, at the end of the... it is a little hard to tell here, and by a little hard I mean currently impossible to tell if I have good or bad Blizzard right now, because at the end of it the Ensnared Demon goes away. So it does take a little bit of time to figure out what kind of Blizzard I got. But for now we're going into the hardest skip of the game, actually. This is called the Overlook skip, and this skip saves about 40 to 50 seconds, depending on how long it takes you to get it. So this is the hardest skip in the game because you need to get almost max distance on your jump. You need to run off at run at the ledge here, and then at the last second jump, you need to get over the ledge there. And then at the ledge, you use the arc, which resets your ground movement. So you can actually use a rising attack, which gives you a lot of momentum. And then on the rising momentum, you use an area attack, which will give you a little bit of extra height. And then at the end of it, you can mist, just to kind of force your hitbox up there if needed. It is possible to get enough height without it, which I actually did there. I did throw the mist in just for good measure, but I got it on second try, which is actually really good, and it saves about 40 seconds. So now we're kind of in a little boss rush. We're going to get through a lot of bosses pretty quickly here. And by a lot of bosses, I mean 2. It does take a little bit of time to get to the third one, but we'll get to him in due time. So right now we are facing Agrius. Now Agrius is the brother of Pan, Pan was one of the few people in the first game who was actually amicable towards us. There were a few, but... so this is an interesting little stealth section. So you're supposed to be very stealthy around Argus as he looks for you. But if you bait him into that corner with that bell, you're actually fast enough with your dashing that you can get all the way to the end here, activate this device with opens to the gate, and then get through the gate without being caught. Now, depending on where he is when you get to the device, you might have to wait for him to come closer and then go around the outside. But in this instance, I got there fast enough that I could just go straight through. So at the top here is a magic font. I'm not going to use it much. I'm just going to get enough for a Chaos Bomb. Because I need a Chaos Bomb to start the boss fight here. Just to kill the owl so that he drops the next part of the Mirror of Fate. So this is another interesting part of the lore. So we are currently looking for parts of the Mirror of Fate. This also, by the way, is where I find out that I have Bad Blizzard because I can't use a Chaos Bomb. This is an issue with having Bad Blizzard because it's constantly draining your mana. You can't actually use magic. So what I do there instead of reloading is I just use Blizzard to cancel the glitch. So it is going to make this fight a little slower. Because I don't have Blizzard. It's also going to cost a little bit of time trying to figure out what was going on. So we're going to take this fight a little slower. Fortunately, we do have Blizzard. The reason we're taking this slower is A, because he's not frozen right now. He can still do all of his moves and pin us down. And the second reason is because now we need to get Blizzard off of him. But going back to the lore discrepancies, the Mirror of Fate is supposed to be a giant mirror, but for some reason it's a pendant-sized mirror. So we need it, so for whatever reason, we need it. There's a reason in game, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. So here we're just trying to keep our distance here, use Explosive Earthquake to do a lot of damage. We are waiting for him to drop just to barely above his health zone. Argus is another one of the bosses that drops to a yellow bar. So we're going to try and freeze him here, hit him a little bit to get him to the yellow, and then Blizzard him to the end. So we're here, we get the Blizzard glitch off. We do have to wait again to see if it's good or bad Blizzard. Now, not having Blizzard here does waste a little bit of time, but not too much time. Fortunately, on this run, because this is the first one I've done without with the transmutation rune, it doesn't actually waste a lot of time overall, whereas it should have wasted a decent amount of time. The big thing about the transmutation rune is that it allows us to use a lot more ensnared demons than we would normally. Without the rune, we would be very, very scarce with using them. We would use one on Carmilla, and then one on Death, and one on the final boss. Maybe. If we had enough. Sometimes you have to use two on Death. So again, because we don't have any magic because of the ensnared demon, it's hard to tell what kind of glitch we have. Fortunately, running into the next fight, it doesn't matter too much. You can just drop it and then grab a magic font. So this next area here, we're heading into Tormaker's lair. Tormaker is a very odd creature in the Lord of Shadow universe. And by very odd creature, I mean he completely changes between Lord of Shadow, Mirror of Fate, and 2. In Mirror of Fate, he is a blue-skinned demon-like creature. However, in this game, they give him a human backstory, and he is human. Now, whether or not the backstory is because of the memory world or not is beyond me. However, they very much pass him off as a human who was given, or who had a very, very unfortunate demise. So in order to get to Toymaker and his part of the puzzle, or mirror rather, we have to activate the odd contraption at the theater, which requires us to kind of run through the underground of the theater here. So on the other side here, there's going to be a engine or whatnot that needs to be a furnace attached to an engine that requires an explosion to kind of get it going. So fortunately, there is a mist font or magic font right here, and since we need to turn into a bat form, or sorry, into a rat again, we're actually gonna just fill up our magic bars here. Now for the next fight, sorry, we don't need that much magic, so we're only gonna fill up to 1 bar. The other reason we're only filling up to 1 bar is because the second bar actually runs out over time. So there's not too much point in filling up. So here it's kind of a weird puzzle. It's just kind of a timing thing. So the pattern is 1, 2 on the first one, 5 on the second, 3 on the third. Or 1 on the third, 1, 3 on the third. So that rat will always die. If you only have 1, you do kind of have to restart, but fortunately you have 9. So here we're just turning back into a human form so we can go on the next stage of the theater. Which is kind of a mini game which helps to explain the backstory of Toymaker. And the long and short of it is Toymaker was a toymaker who made toys, and then he was asked to come to the castle by Bernard, one of the Bernards, who was one of the original owners of the castle, Walter Bernard, I believe. Yeah, Walter. And then Walter imprisons him, and then a demon shows up, and then things get bad, and then, yeah. So each of these sections here, you get 500 experience for completing it correctly, which doesn't really matter in New Game Plus. But as soon as you get the correct thing, you can skip the animation, or the cutscene, rather, and go on to the next part. So after all 5 scenes of the play, we get to go up and collect the heart of Toymaker, which is awkward because the explanation of what is currently happening to Toymaker is weird in this world and hard to explain. But he comes to life and then immediately gets possessed, and then you have to fight him and his odd demon puppets. So there are a couple stages of this fight. First, you start off with Sir Walter. Now, Sir Walter, you start off with an earthquake until he gets pretty low. Then you kind of go in for a whirlwind. Because we do have the blizzard glitch. He is kind of freezing here. And we do have good blizzard glitch, so I do take a little bit of fire magic there, just because we do need fire magic for the next part. And here we soft block the game, because sometimes the game... So when he grabs you like that, he does get frozen. And because of the way the blizzard glitch works, because I was jumping at the time, when he grabs me, the game registers that I'm actually jumping, so it thinks I tried to jump out while I shouldn't have been able to. It is a little unfortunate, but we still can get Blizzard off of him. We do have to redo that first fight there, which is a little unfortunate, but it's not too big of a problem. The fight is actually still pretty easy, even without Blizzard. He does get a couple extra swings here, which he doesn't normally get, but again, it's not too big a deal. Next, he summons very hard to pronounce serpent name. It's a serpent. It was a little harder to get into his hitbox without Blizzard, but again, still pretty easy to do. And then we get into the next fight. This fight's not too bad, even though he's not Blizzarded. We do have a lot of damage with the Chaos Claws. Now, we're not doing any of the combo moves because he does have, again, aerial components. But we get into the next part here, which is actually a pretty nice place because we can actually drop him to the ground like that. And I'm choosing to punch him here instead of anything else just because a little low on the blue magic. And I'm looking to save it for a Blizzard, hoping to not drop an Ensnared Demon. Although we do have a lot, it is still helpful to keep them for a little later on. Now we do freeze him here. Another reason that I'm actually keeping, not using the Ensnared Demon is because I'm looking to have blue magic at the end of the fight so I can see what kind of Blizzard I get. Because more often than not, you actually get a bad Blizzard here, which is important to know going into the next fights. You would actually still keep it if it was bad Blizzard for a pretty long time, just because you don't really need to use blue magic for a little bit. But it's nice to know going into the next boss fight. Fortunately, we do get a good Blizzard, so we do lose a little bit of time. Again, mitigated by the fact that I'm using Transmutation Runes. So now we get a cutscene with Trevor, and then he gives us the full pieces of the mirror, full mirror of fate. Back into the real world, and we have kind of an inkling of the general area of the next Acolyte. So we're gonna head over there and hope. So this next area, again, it's a lot of, it's kind of a lot of moving to and from one area to another. So there's not too much going on right now. We're exploring another part of the city. This is actually very close to an area a little later on where you can do a very odd strat that doesn't save time but is super swaggy. And I say swaggy in the loosest of terms for a swag strat, which is because of the outside area here. And it, for the aesthetic purposes, having all of that just falling area on the outsides of the destroyed city, you can actually do a weird trick where you can load a checkpoint and then walk backwards and then jump off the ledge and then dash towards the wall. And it'll spawn you back at the checkpoint, but all of the walls won't be fully loaded, so you can kind of jump around where you're not supposed to be able to. But it doesn't really save a lot of time because of how long it takes to just fall to to the respawn point. So this boss here, he has a faceplate which protects him. You can see the health going down slowly from Blizzard, but he's not taking a lot of damage. The fists can't hit him there. However, for him to unthaw, it actually takes a decent amount of time, so instead I just let Blizzard do the damage here. Now, the phases of this robot are a little awkward, but because he kind of forces himself to get up every now and then, it's not too bad. So I go for the fire cover, and I'm actually just outside of range. He shoots me a little bit, but it's not a problem, because he actually doesn't pull out of his gun turrets yet. Once he pulls out the turrets, it is a little more unfortunate, but because he didn't pull them out this time, we were fine. So going into this next area here, we're going to be kind of introduced to a new character. And by kind of introduced, I mean you see him in passing once, and then you kind of start following him. And it's this gentleman here, and he has a hood, and he's very mysterious, and he appears to have a combat cross. So here, because I need a little bit of fire magic in the next area, I'm actually just going to take a little bit of time to kill these instead of dropping an ensnared demon, just to get a little bit of fire magic. Now, the reason I will need a little bit of blue magic as well, but the reason I'm only getting fire magic is because if I were to go into the next area with no magic at all, I would have to drop at least 2 ensnared demons. But here, there's a chance I only need to drop 1. Because the time between the first instance of magic and the second one is so great. So here, we're just freezing all of these guys here. I'm going to drop this ladder here, which is what we needed red magic for. Now, this next area here does have a skip that saves about 20 or 30 seconds, but it is a little hard to do. And if you fail, you have to deal with all of the enemies on the bottom before retrying. Basically, the skip involves using the momentum of the chandeliers there or whatnot to kind of angle yourself. So you do a lot of back and forth. Then on the last one, because that corner one, the first corner one there, has both sides, you can, at the last second, switch from going across to taking the left side, which will give you enough momentum to jump onto the lower platform where the purple line is. And then from there, you can do a guillotine jump to get yourself on top of that beam there, and then jump up top here. Save a little bit of time, but in this particular instance, I wanted to go with the safe route instead of potentially losing a lot of time. Now, there are a lot of places that you need magic for here. Now, here, there are 2 enemies that are going to drop down behind me. There's 2 options here. You can attempt to go up without getting hit, which you can do sometimes. It is possible to dodge, somewhat dodge their shots, depending on when they shoot them. If you're already in motion, it's a lot harder. It's more luck-based. But if you're not moving, you can actually wait just a couple seconds, and sometimes you can get away with not getting caught. Now here I'm trying to get through without using another ensnared demon. Fortunately, I run out of mist here, and actually because I run out of mist here, the power is actually going to go off. I'm going to have to redo the entire cycle, which does waste a little bit of time, but fortunately we don't have to redo all of the freezing the fire pillars there. I actually do use the second ensnared demon here just because I want to make sure that I have enough chaos magic, just in case I miss at the top there. So going into this next area here is going to be a group of enemies that are in kind of awkward positions. We want to kill them. We need to kill all of them in the room in order to be able to progress to the next boss. But unfortunately, some are on top and some are on bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and fire cover all of the ground ones into one area. And then after that, we're going to try an explosive earthquake, depending on where the next two enemies are. If we're lucky, we'll be able to explosive earthquake them, even from the ground, even though they're up top. Fortunately, some of them actually happen to come down. So we were able to get the explosive earthquake off pretty quickly there. And we're going to go into the next fight here. So this fight is one of the scarier fights for having the blizzard glitch. Because the boss has some cycles between his three phases, where his health bar disappears and you're actually not able to hurt him. If you're in range of him when it ticks down to these sections, you'll actually soft lock the game, and it has the potential to also erase your save data when this happens. Fortunately, it is pretty easy to back away. His damage meters are at 75 or 130% and 75%. And like I was saying before, the Chaos Bombs actually do a lot of damage. So I took it a little bit safe there. I could have stayed in for an extra hit or two, but I decided to back up and just use the Chaos Bombs. And once that second phase is done, you can head in and hit him as much as you want, because the third phase just ends in death, of course. So even though it does have the potential to soft lock, it's actually one of the faster and safer bosses, because you do have the ability to just back off at any time, and his health bar is... his cycles are very noticeable. So as long as you're being careful, there's no risk at all. And so this next area here is what I was talking about earlier with the Talisman of the Demon. It is possible to do the entire climbing section in the next area by quickly freezing all of the enemies and then going for the climb. However, the problem with that is once you get to the top, because it's such a long climb, they'll almost all have unfrozen. So you're basically gambling on whether or not they hit you. If they do hit you, you waste a lot of time because it's such a long climb. So instead I choose to use the Talisman here to clear the entire field. This is going to make the final fight take a little bit longer, but because we have so many ensnared demons, we're actually not worried about that in the slightest. Now here's a nice little optimization. You can actually stand on the gargoyle there. It's supposed to be kind of a perch point, but because it doesn't really realize what you're doing, you just kind of stand there and you have full range of all your moves, and you can jump into the window, which leads you to the cathedral here. Now this church is warded, so you can't use magic. However, we have the blizzard glitch, so he just kind of gets frozen in place here. And then we use the sustained sweep attack, which is a basic combo move. So now here we're trying to freeze him, and I'm actually opting to not use an ensnared demon here. because I'm just need enough magic for the next section here to be able to use Chaos Claws on the fire that spawns, or the fire pillars that spawn. The fight here is ended by breaking all of these pillars with the Chaos Claws. Now, it is possible to actually target Victor here, but as long as you keep your camo away from him, it's not too bad. Now, a little bit of an explanation of what's going on here. We've actually chased him down here, and it turns out that this is the last living Belmont. Our only living descendant, Victor Belmont. He has formed his own sort of resistance with whatever was still around. And he has a replica vampire killer. So after initially not really knowing what was, or whether we were friend or foe, we spare his life, and then he agrees to help us. Now that help is short-lived, but we'll get to that in a second. Victor Belmont is another addition to the story that does not make a lot of sense. So here we spare him, and he kind of realizes that, hey, maybe we're on the same side. So we're going to exit this little area underground here that we found ourselves under, and we're going to go look for the second acolyte. So we get into this next area here and find out that, hey, Victor can double jump. Awesome. We can't. So we have to be a little more creative with our method of getting across. The other interesting thing about the lore is that at some point Dracula could fly, and now we've forgotten, which is interesting. But we don't need to talk about that. Dracula's only super powerful when he's a villain. So this next part here, we're going to be again on the surface, and we're actually going to reunite with Zobek's lieutenant, and then we're going to get swarmed by a bunch of demons. So I do pop a ensnared demon here for a couple of reasons. One, just so that I have magic here, and two, because we actually, if we go quick enough here, we can carry the first bit of the ensnared demon into the next boss fight, which usually we can get him out of his first, maybe even second phase, before the ensnared demon runs out. So this part of the game is a little sketchy, and by sketchy I mean the lore. So Victor determines what we are trying to do, and in order to draw out the next acolyte, he sacrifices himself in order to cause a large explosion, which draws the attention of the second acolyte. There's not really a reason why he should have had to do that, because Zobek is a mind reader and could have just figured it out. But whatever. The last of the Belmont lineage is gone. Sure. So now that we're fighting this inner demon thing, inner Dracula, our own inner demons, we've actually ripped out the power of double jump, so we can double jump now. And this head will actually just insult us and slander both us and Alucard, but we don't care. The lower part of this boss actually doesn't have a lot of health, and because of the blizzard glitch, we can actually do a significant amount of damage to the inner part of the demon. So it's actually a very quick boss fight. After this, we have the ability to do a double jump, which is interesting that we would get the double jump so late in the game, because there's not really a lot of game left. So it's a little unfortunate that it kept the double jump from us for so long, but not much can be done about it. So we're going into another stealth section here. This stealth section here has a neat little skip that makes it a little easier to do. It is the stealth section is supposed to be kind of a puzzle here, but there's actually a nice little trick we can do. Now, first of all, we're going to have to return to checkpoint, of course, because we do have the blizzard glitch going on. But in this next area here, there's 3 Golgrath guards actually guarding a door, and for whatever reason, the Golgrath guard up top doesn't have vision of the 2 on the bottom. So we're going to throw bats at the farthest one. The bats kind of disappeared there for some reason. So we throw bats at the farthest one to get the guard closest to us to walk away. Then we're going to dash up to this one, and we're going to mist form at the bottom of the stairs. And we actually have enough mist to get right behind him without getting caught. So this next laser field area here is a little annoying. If you get caught by the lasers, you'll get shot by a giant statue that shoots an arrow at you, and you'll respawn at the beginning. Fortunately, it is you can double jump over them. And actually, if you're close enough to the end when you trigger it, you do have a little bit of time where if you double jump at the top of the mist, or at the top of the vent, it is supposed to be disabled, but if you jump high enough, the prompt is actually still there, and you can turn into a mist form and actually make it all the way up without getting shot, which is a nice little way to save some time if you do manage to get caught here. Now, this area here, even with the explanation of the pocket dimension and everything, is extremely hard to suspend disbelief on. So we encounter the second acolyte, and the second acolyte is somehow more powerful than us, even though we are supposed to be the strongest creature alive. We are even stronger than Satan. We can, even though we've had to refine all of our powers and everything, we are the strongest creature, and I keep saying we are, I'm referring to Dracula and Gabriel. Gabriel is the strongest creature in the world, and the second acolyte of Satan is somehow rendering him powerless. So Dracula follows the young Trevor and drags the second acolyte into his pocket dimension, where he summons 3 lost riders to come attack. So we're doing a little bit of a kind of a quick kill on this boss. The fat one is the easiest to hit, and we're kind of pushing him into the corner so that we can whirlwind at him, and then as we're whirlwinding into the corner, it just hits him with the rest of the attack. So we're always hitting him with the full force of whirlwind. Makes this fight go by pretty quickly. And then at the last section here, he's going to start shooting electrical currents at us. It is possible, or the object here is that you're supposed to dash. Sometimes it will take 2 or 3, but if you go pretty quickly, you only need to do 1 dash. So somehow we have determined that we are more powerful in this world than the other world, and we're able to defeat the second acolyte, and now there's but 1 acolyte between us and Satan. Now let's get out of this weird pocket dimension world thing that makes no sense. So now that we have the puzzle, the game is going to throw a lot of mirror of fate puzzles at us. Or sorry, now that we have the mirror, it's going to throw a lot of puzzles at us. Now, the mirror of fate puzzles are extremely aggravating because it makes no sense that... So they took a extremely powerful artifact possessed by Dracula, which has the ability to tell the fate of any who look into it, lets them see their future. They turned it into a handheld door unlocker. But the only way to unlock the door is by the mirror shattering every time you get to a door, and he has to use his newfound telekinesis, which he's never used before, to re-put the mirror back together such that it will open the door. Because this is totally what the Mirror of Fate was for opening doors, not seeing your fate or anything, but we'll completely forgo that and how he suddenly got a mirror, or suddenly got telekinesis, rather. So this area here, or this specific section here is annoying, because even though you know what the controls are, you have to wait for the flames to cycle through before it'll allow you to go. Now here, there are 2 pressure plates which will lower these platforms here. We have to hit the platforms with our shadow dagger so the lieutenant can jump through. Meanwhile, we are trying to make sure the fireballs do not hit him. The fireballs will instantly kill him, so we have to run between both quickly while making sure his platforms stay under his feet and making sure the fireballs don't hit him. Now, the last 2 are a little tricky to target quickly, so I actually accidentally hit the one behind him. But fortunately, the fireball doesn't hurt him, so it's not a big deal. The fireball can hit Gabriel. It doesn't do a lot of damage, so it's irrelevant. And we're going to head into this next area here, which has a bunch of summoners. This fight can go very poorly, in the sense that they can actually start spawning a lot of creatures. But because fire cover is so strong, you can avoid most of it. Sometimes they will still summon a demon, which basically they all kind of fuse into one enemy, which does waste a little bit of time, but it's not too much time. Now, when they do it is completely random, so sometimes you get lucky enough to kill them instantly, and sometimes you don't. So here I kind of make a little bit of a mistake. You can't do Earthquake while you're off of Shadow Daggers, and I just misclick on the controller and fail to pull out the Shadow Dagger, so I use a second Ensnared Demon. Fortunately, we actually got a lot of them on this run, so we're not worried about it too much. And these Banshees actually kind of split up, so we actually just opted to go for Explosive Earthquake instead of Fire Cover. So this here is the last Ask the Lieutenant for Help sequence, which is nice. This is also the part of the game where we find out that the Lieutenant isn't the Lieutenant and is actually Alucard. So we're going to go through a huge flashback sequence. And at the end of the explosion way back when, in the 1500s against Renaud and the rest of the Brotherhood of Light, Alucard actually shows up and formulates a very complicated plan for revenge against Zobek and Satan. So, obviously, eventually people are going to try and bring Satan back, and that's just obvious. Zobek is going to bide his time and wait, and Alucard comes up with a plan that he will stab Dracula with his sword, the Casagrima, which is made of the same metal from the altered dimension where the vampire killer was lost. The sword will weaken Dracula but not kill him. It will take most of his memories and powers away. and leave him in a weakened state. So Zobek will assume him dead or just out of the picture and gain power. Meanwhile, the followers of Satan will register. Satan will sense that Dracula is weakened and attempt to come back. When all of this happens, Alucard guesses accurately that Zobek will enlist Dracula's help to defeat Satan. Because Zobek can't take Satan down by himself. Then, because Dracula will have no memories after being stabbed, Zobek won't be able to figure out that Dracula is actually scheming against him with Alucard. Alucard will set all the pieces in place. He will take control of Zobek's lieutenant, who is supposed to be an automaton. So Zobek will never have any reason to mind read the automaton. And Alucard will set forth the pieces in order to give Dracula all of the powers he needs in the pocket dimension, which he helped set up. Because he helped set it up, there are some pieces of him in it, such as Child Cheddar and stuff like that. He will be able to help guide Dracula, and at the final moment, they will be able to defeat Zobek and Satan. So this is the turning point where they do that. So this fight is actually pretty lenient, because it gives you a full bar of each magic before the fight. So we're using Whirlwind, A, because it's the fastest, and B, because we do need to save some Chaos Magic between the two cycles here, just to destroy them. Now, his moves can be a little bit annoying. However, once you get most of your Whirlwind off on him, he usually drops his attacks. And because his attacks are so area of effect, you can usually actually get off a Whirlwind even if he's doing an attack, just by going through one of the holes in his attacks. So going into this second area here, or second cycle here, we obviously don't have enough magic for Whirlwind. It is possible to get the last bar down with Explosive Earthquake, but it is pretty difficult. So if it doesn't start going, if his health doesn't start going down quickly, you do have to drop an Ensnared Demon, which isn't the end of the world, but... Now, because we did get hit there, it is pretty hard to get another Earthquake off, so I choose to just drop the Ensnared Demon and Whirlwind. Now, I'm trying to do a little bit of dodging around the green there just to prevent myself from getting caught. Unfortunately, the green electricity does force itself on Death, which wasn't something I was aware was possible. After weakening him to that state, he kind of puts up a defensive chain around him to try and recover a little bit of health, but fortunately we have missed, and we can end the fight here. So he tries to land the final blow with the combat cross, but he is A, in a weakened state, and B, we're faster and stronger and everything. So we actually managed to land the killing blow on Zobek before he can do anything against us. Now reunited with Sun, reunited with the memories of our 500-year conspiracy against Zobek and Satan, Alucard and Dracula can progress towards their ultimate goal of exacting revenge. So the reunion between father and son is cut short by the ever-pressing need to find Satan. Dracula and Alucard agree to split up and search the city for the third acolyte. The third acolyte, who is conveniently actually in Dracula's cathedral. So this last part of the game is just a little backtracking to one of the areas we previously visited, obviously the start of the game. Fortunately, because we do have the map runes, we can get there pretty quickly. So this area here can waste just a little bit of time, because there are the Satan spawns fighting with the giant riot police. But there's only one of them, so that second one will run after you, normally. And sometimes they can actually knock you down there using their projectiles. If you're quick enough and lucky enough, you can actually get up there pretty quickly. But sometimes it takes 2 or 3 tries. So there are 4 map rooms, one of each of the 4 cities. So they're, depending on the area you need to go to in each district, it might take a little bit of backtracking to get there. But it is a lot faster than having to travel between districts. And where we're going is pretty close to the map room, actually. It's on the other side of 2 loading screens, essentially. So going into the last few fights here, we actually do have a decent amount of ensnared demons, so we're not too worried about that. If we were worried, we could take a small pit stop to visit a magic font near the end, but it's not really necessary. So the area has changed a little bit since we were first here, of course, because the chemical has spread through the city and caused loss and destruction, and also there's sin spawning everywhere. We run into Alucard here, of course, who was waiting for us, and we start our ascent into where the third acolyte is, doing the final Mirror of Fate puzzle. Now, the puzzle can actually be very finicky here. You can be hovering the piece over where it goes, and sometimes it won't fit, and sometimes it'll snap into place long before it looks like it should be snapping into place. With the final Mirror of Fate puzzle done, we can see in the background some satanic ritual going on, quite literally. And before us, we witnessed the third acolyte as he summons forth Satan from the deepest, darkest reaches of hell. Fortunately for us, or unfortunately, it doesn't really affect us too great a deal, but Satan is upset that we haven't been dispatched of or disposed of, and actually takes care of the third acolyte for us. So there's not too much going on in the rest of the game. Satan is going to summon a giant creature called Leviathan, and with it he is going to attempt to eradicate the Earth. That's kind of not something we want, though, so we're going to go ahead and try and stop him. So after the cutscene here, we're going to be climbing atop of Leviathan's back, trying to reach where Satan is. Conveniently, there's all these pegs on Leviathan for us to scale in very odd patterns. But there's kind of like acid pits shooting out at us, but it deals extremely minimal damage and doesn't knock us off, so it doesn't actually matter. Now, as we get to the top of this grapple point here, Leviathan will actually level out for us so that we can make it to the chains. And we need to unhook the chains so that we can continue progressing towards Satan. The chains that we're not entirely sure are why they're on the back of Leviathan, because it's just a giant summoned creature of unimaginable strength. There's not really any reason for chains to be on it, but sure. It's kind of a dragon. Whatever. So on the back here, there's going to be more banshees. There's only 3 this time. We're going to drop an ensnared demon here and go ahead and try to fire cover them all. They can summon a creature up here, but these ones, for whatever reason, are more unlikely to than the rest, although they will sometimes get a little away from each other. We managed to kill all of them pretty quickly, so we're going to head over here to the chain, and we're going to enter the final fight. So Satan actually takes control of Alucard here and possesses him, so we have to do the final fight against Alucard, our own son. Now, there's 4 stages to this fight. At the end of every stage, Alucard will take to the air and shoot down 7 goo projectiles at us before coming back to the ground. The fight's actually pretty easy with Whirlwind, so we're not too worried about it. Although he does like to move around a lot, so it can be a little hard to land full Whirlwinds on him. Alucard is extremely mobile as well. The entire fight, Satan is kind of trying to get under our skin, saying things like, you kill your own son and stuff like that. Obviously baiting a response, or attempting to bait a response out of Dracula. So this, again, is one of the place where we would use a talisman if we had it. Because his first cycle is most of his first bar, you can actually drop him basically to the first cycle. You're a whirlwind away with a talisman. And you actually can get a second talisman if you go back to the shop, but it's so out of the way, it's not worth it. So I dropped the Ensnared Demon a little early there, because you usually have enough time to kill the next 2 phases with 1. And even if you don't get the last phase, I have an extra one, so wasting 1 isn't a problem, really. So this is pretty much the end of the game here. At the end of the game here, Satan and Dracula are on the ground. Satan calls him a coward, says he won't kill his own son. Gabriel anticipates Satan's reaction when Dracula goes to stab Alucard, and Satan dives out at the last second, and Dracula kills him and defeats all the evil in the world. And Alucard and Dracula walk